Welcome to the FNO InsureTech podcast, a place where movers and shakers from all points within the insurance ecosystem gather and discuss all things InsureTech. We talk about how technology and innovation are affecting and driving change in the industry. Here are your hosts, Matt D. Fothery, Lee Boyd, and Rob Beller.
Hey, podcast world and Lee Boyd.
Hey, Rob Beller and podcast world.
Did I surprise? I kind of surprised you a little bit there.
Yeah, every time.
I didn't jibber jabber. I got right to you.
You normally jibber jabber. There was no jibber jabber.
You can count on a little jibber jabber. You had your feet up. You weren't ready for this intro that we're doing here.
Yeah, you just threw me for a loop.
Well, and it's kind of the topic today is experience. Now, if we would have we've only done this podcast 80 some times.
Right.
But if we would have done it 500 times, I bet that we would both be much better at it. Don't you think?
I would think so. If we had done it 500 times, that's a lot of repetition.
So the big question is, how do you get your training faster, more effectively, so it sinks in deeper, so that you don't have to go through 500 reps to get good at this? And we apologize to everybody who has to listen to it.
Right.
But how do you do that? Any ideas?
I think that's a great question. And I would think that our guest today has some answers. Who is our guest today, Rob?
We have Stephen Fromkin on, who's a co-founder and chief content officer at Talespin. Do you know about them?
I do. So we learned about Talespin not too long ago, and Talespin is a platform that you can use in your organization for VR education. In a nutshell, I think he'll tell us a lot more about it, but it allows the learner to go on this educational voyage where they can immerse themselves in a new world to help repetitively learn trades so that they're ready to go out into the real world and actually do their job.
It's very emotionally connected.
Mm-hmm.
It's real world connected, that you can make a decision to go, one way or another as you go through the training. And it's the closest thing that we have today to actually sending the person out into the field and letting them run. And for companies like ours that spend a tremendous amount of time and energy and effort and money in getting people educated and trained as rapidly as we can, this is a potential huge breakthrough.
I think it's huge. It's the next generation of learning, and it's really where the future is. We started with Google Glasses years and years ago,
right?
Trying to come up with something, but now, Stephen and the group are really using this to get everybody educated in a real world, and you can use this education device across the nation or the world. They don't all have to come to a single location and stand in front of a lecture stand. You can really educate people from anywhere.
Right. And think flight simulator for a moment. Flight simulators allow pilots to train and train and train, and also, of course, to make terrible mistakes without any consequences. But that's the same thing here. It's real world feel without the consequences. We're excited, and so I think you'll enjoy our episode, because not only do we talk all about Talespin and Stephen and what his product is, but we also get on his back pretty good about giving us something for free so that we can start using it here at our company, which we're really excited about. So, because I'm never too embarrassed to ask.
No, you're not.
To ask the question. So why don't we do this? Without further ado, let's get to our real interview. This is not virtual reality. This is the real thing.
Reality.
This is just reality. That's correct. Our reality interview with Stephen Fromkin, Chief Content Officer and co-founder at Talespin. Hey, everybody. We're here with our guest today, coming to us live from Los Angeles. Mr. Steve Fromkin, Chief Content Officer and co-founder at Talespin. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure, it's a pleasure to have you, a transplanted Easterner, correct?
As most people are in Los Angeles, well, maybe not most people, but a lot of people are in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I am a transplant from Connecticut. Spent a lot of time in Massachusetts, but here I am in LA.
Where are you in LA?
So we're headquartered in Culver City.
Mm-hmm.
Not that anybody's spending too much time at the office these days, but
No.
yeah.
No. I grew up in Downey, California, if you know
Sure.
where that is.
I know where that is. Yeah.
And so I'm an LA guy from way back,
Yeah.
but born and raised, I'm one of those guys.
Okay.
So you're here today from Talespin.
Yeah.
They had a drawing for who was going to be on the podcast, and obviously you were the loser. So here you are today. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's start by kind of helping everybody to understand, because today's episode is unlike any episode that we've had as far as the technology, the particular technology that we're talking about, which is VR. And why don't you give us a minute or two on what Talespin is and what you guys do?
Talespin uses spatial computing technology or immersive computing. In other words, we use VR and AR as a tool for learning or as a tool for work in the field, whatever the field may be. So, field in terms of insurance, in terms of claims, could be being out at a claim when it's required, or in underwriting for risk assessment, loss control, being out in a facility or in an area where the environment has to be viewed and captured. So, we're using these tools because they do remarkable things. We're still discovering how effective they are. Last week, there was a report that came out. We did a study with PwC, and I mean, it's measuring some pretty amazing metrics. And so for learning, we're looking at, 4 times faster than classroom learning and 1.5 times faster than e-learning, and that matters remarkably in these days, even pre-COVID, when we were talking about what the future of work looks like. We're talking about a more dispersed, more remote workforce. Now amidst COVID and post-COVID, we're talking about that continuing. So we're really bringing some experiential technology tools to an industry that has a need for big workforce transformation.
Right. And I saw that study by PwC, and it's fascinating that they say that VR learners in the study completed training up to 4 times faster. Before we dig into that, I want to ask you the question. I want to level set on what VR, let's be clear on what VR is.
Yeah.
And maybe AR too, or as opposed to.
Sure. So VR, virtual reality, is generally a hardware, right? So you're using a hardware in which your vision and audio and maybe some other senses, but particularly vision, are obfuscated from the rest of the world, right? And so you're in an environment that is artificial as opposed to your real environment. And there's lots of different ways that can look and feel. Photoreal, it can feel like a video game, it can feel like a room that you're used to, a conference room that you're accustomed to. But the difference is that virtual reality, and here's where a little bit of the magic is, you can really affect sort of space and time, right? It doesn't matter where you are or how long it takes. So, for example, we built a training module that is a first notice of loss training module. And so, as a learner, you receive a phone call while you're in VR. It's not a real phone call, it's a virtual human audio simulation phone call. But what you're visualizing is just an architect's rendering of a room. And as you proceed through that phone call, as you answer questions, mostly ask questions, to scope that loss in that moment, the visualization reveals in front of you. So we're providing the visual context that an individual sitting at a desk in a call center who is not going to be out in the field We're providing that visual context and building that muscle while practicing the soft skills of that conversation that is so important for the customer's experience. So when I say that VR is sort of violating space and time, in other words, we can kind of do a lot that you can't do with traditional learning modalities. AR is augmented reality, right? So you're really adding a digital layer on top of the real world. And with both of these technologies, there's varying degrees of advanced add-ons. So, you can use hand tracking, or you can use, a device to feel things and get haptic feedback. So, but the real difference is whether or not you're cut off from the world around you.
Can it be interactive? If you answer a certain way, it goes down a different path?
It's absolutely that. It is a branched narrative conversation with virtual human technology, which is part of our tech stack, not just for insurance, but we're building a virtual human content library for more of an HR, more horizontal in terms of performance feedback, professional skills, leadership skills, compliance, those types of more general skills, as opposed to the vertical of insurance. But that same technology is being applied in our insurance learning modules.
Why insurance? Of all the verticals out there, I would think that VR is accepted in certain verticals more so than others. And in a vertical like insurance, which they still fax things in the insurance industry, why insurance? How did that happen?
How did that happen? That's a good way to put it. It was one of and there's been a lot of punchlines to that question, by the way.
I'm sure.
Right?
I'm sure.
Mostly by folks in the insurance industry, not even by me. But they're like, "What'd you guys lose a bet?" But it was one of the first enterprise engagements. So when we began our work in enterprise, we started in 2015. We were feeling out the space. Both Kyle and I had been working and consulting in the VR space, and we kind of were intrigued by where it would go. And we knew we wanted to build toward an enterprise solution. We didn't know exactly what that was going to be. And within about 9 months, we began some conversations with Farmers Insurance. And I can talk about that out loud because and they've done their own PR on it. And
they're located in your neighborhood.
And that's sort of coincidentally, we just ended up building some relationships with some folks. We met somebody in the innovation team there. And that led to, why don't you come in and tell us a little bit more? And by 2017, we had launched a pilot with claims training. It was a water damage scoping walkthrough. So you simulated basically walking through. You just got a work order. This type of leak reported this many days ago.
Was that for adjusters or for FNOL?
It was for adjusters.
Okay.
But it could work for FNOL because you're still kind of understanding the process. You're still building the I mean, with something like this, the interaction and experience is so engaging that put more people through it, put agents through it so they understand, put everybody through it. They don't have to spend hours. They don't necessarily need to score very high, but you really begin to understand some of the processes that go on in your industry. We built in 18 different decision points into that very first water damage scoping investigation module, including, are there indicators of fraud? Do you need alternative living expenses? Or does the policyholder need alternative living expenses? What's the water category? We went pretty deep into the business process. And because of that, the Farmer's Own internal testing showed a 22% increase in decision-making accuracy. And so between that and, another first engagement was telco. So we still work with some business in telco, but insurance ended up being the most requested video, so to speak. We ended up getting a lot of inquiries.
I totally get it for the insurance space. It makes a lot of sense because, and in particular property, but it could be auto too. In property, you have these complex structures. Pretty much everyone is different materials, all kinds of different. I mean, frankly, it sounds from your side of it really hard, right? You have to make this immersive picture, right, that they're inside of the whole time, and different decisions, and it sounds really complex.
Yeah, it is. It can be. There are a lot of smart people at our company at Talespin. There are really smart people that are not me, that are engineers and
Not
designers.
represented
No,
by our current guest.
right, right,
Okay.
right. No,
Mhm.
no, we have brilliant people who are
Sure.
thinking about what are the common features of an inspection. How does an inspection for risk assessment in underwriting, how does that align or not align with the scoping of a specific damage state in that same environment? What are those features? So we do a lot of work with learning folks, learning. We're not a learning company per se, but we're working with specific pools of subject matter experts, and we have some learning expertise internally in how to build the learning templates for certain types of experiences like that are pertinent to insurance. And that's really what it's all about, is aligning to certain skill. It's that skills alignment, right? So how do we address the workforce disruption? Again, not just the COVID workforce disruption, but with certain generation retiring and the need to rapidly scale up workforces, whether they be remote and therefore sitting at a desk or on a call center, or they need to be in the field. How do we get folks who are used to being digital experiential natives? How do we get them to learn and engage? And how do we cross train? And that's kind of where this technology becomes really strong.
I was wondering about on the insurance world. Well, first off, I'm looking at some of the verticals you have here, runways and things like that. What about the medical field? I see this as a huge opportunity to do VR training in the medical world. Is that anything you've thought about?
So we've done a little bit of work with some other companies in the medical field. There is a huge amount to do. There's
Is
a
there?
fantastic amount that can be done with therapies and medical device training. We
Yeah.
Sure.
often get asked nurses, nurses are the
Sure.
ones that really, they're the ones who are doing the most amount of customer or patient facing work.
Hmm.
They are doing a lot of the hardest work. And so we've been asked repeatedly about doing some certain types of training for nurses. It's just as a startup, there's only so much we can focus on.
You have to make your decisions on that. It's you can't be everything to everybody. One of the things about VR to me are the glasses. Okay, let's talk about that. I mean, we know that Facebook bought Oculus. That was a huge deal. It's a big hardware thing. You guys aren't hardware providers, but kind of to use your thing, to use your program, to use your product, I guess,
Yep.
you have to have this big bulbous thing that goes on the front of your face.
Yep.
That seems like it might be a little complicated to deal with. I know they're not inexpensive. They probably ship them around to different people, like you're talking about in remote settings. Like if I wanted to train on it, would you have to send me or is there a shortcut to that? Talk about the glasses issue.
Sure. So the hardware is not necessarily an easy thing to solve, but it's getting solved, right? It's the natural course of things. At the end of the day, the juice is worth the squeeze. You're going to, not just you, others, many organizations are going to engage in this inevitably. It's a better, more efficient, cost effective way to train that does engage people better. It even engages in recruiting. We even have metrics on recruiting going up at certain organizations we've spoken to. So it's really worth it. Therefore, we just have to accept that over time, it's going to go down in price. It's going to be easier. The device is going to get smaller. And eventually, just like a cell phone call or a online call, we're all going to dial in on different devices and we're all going to be in a chat or in a conversation or collaborative training. We're all going to be on whatever we're on. Someone's going to use iOS, someone's going to use Android, someone's going to use a computer, someone's going to have a Oculus Quest, whatever the next model is. Someone will have an HTC Vive Plus, whatever the next model is, and so on, right? And that's just how it's going to be. So in the meantime, how do we get there? Well, what we're doing is working with various organizations that are helping with deployment. So PwC has a big effort towards business transformation, obviously, and they're helping with deployment for certain clients of theirs. We're helping with deployment and putting together leasing programs where we need to. But right now, we hear, well, we have 50,000 employees. How are you going to be able to handle that? My answer right now is more of a question. It's, are you ready to deploy to 50,000 employees? Because I know no one is. No one's really ready to do that today. And so
Right.
where are they ready? They're ready for 500, a couple of thousand. That's doable. So we either ship devices to one location where they're going to train when maybe COVID goes away and people are going to regional centers or labs to train, or they go to an individual's home. And that's kind of what we're doing now for pilot programs. It's just about knowing that it's cumbersome, but it's going to clear itself up. And this is how to really get involved and get testing and show an organization, show your own organization that this content works is just by using the device and sort of gritting your teeth and bearing it where you need to.
So if a new company comes to you and says, "Hey, we want to go down this road, we want to start implementing VR learning," what happens? I mean, if it is a insurance company, everybody trains a little bit different, but let's say a large insurance company comes to you, what's the first thing that happens there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So generally, we have several off-the-shelf training modules, and that's by design. So what we learned
Sure.
early on was everybody says they want something custom, not just in insurance. Everybody wants something custom,
Yep.
but a lot of it isn't as custom as anyone would think.
They think it might be.
Yeah. So look, when you go and play several different, there's lots of sports. You still need to throw and run and catch a ball, right? In insurance, there's some basic skills and needs, and the customization per department or per organization that can happen within the curriculum at that organization. We're not replacing curriculum. We're not replacing facilitators or teachers. We're not coming in with one whole program that does it all. That's not going to be for years. And in fact, we don't currently have one model of training in any curriculum anywhere, in schools and universities and in enterprise training. So VR or AR, they become an addition, an augmentation, no pun intended, to the existing curriculum. So what we would start with is, to your question, Lee, what we would start with is try these off the shelf modules.
Yeah.
There's a couple for property, there's some for auto. That's where you really get your, if it's claims, that is, right? Because these are all
Sure.
three of these are claims. Try these, pilot these, put them through a class, whether it's 16 or 20, or ideally it's a high enough to get some good statistical value out of that pilot, and see how it feels. See how it feels for your organization. Get feedback from your learners and from others. And from there, let's figure out what's next. And
So,
that's really the way to dip your toe in the water, because that's going to be much less expensive than spinning up a version that is custom and has your individual company logos on it.
so farmers, to use that example, as a company that's fully bought in, it sounds like 4 times faster, better retention, etc. I mean, is that what they're excited about? Is that the content is getting through quicker, better, stronger? Why is farmers so bought in, or your better customers?
Yeah, I think not just farmers, but others have understand it really has trained more effectively. Let me give you another statistic based on that PwC study that showed there was, I think, about 275% higher confidence to basically act on what an individual learned, right? So imagine coming out not with just better retention, but coming out with a better level of confidence, ability to elaborate. We did a study in which side by side, A B testing with VR and desktop, folks who went through VR were 400% more able to elaborate on things they had not even learned. Not even learned. It wasn't even in the training, but because of what they went through, they were able to extrapolate and discuss and answer questions they were being asked. Where folks who had a more traditional sort of desktop version just said that wasn't taught, right? So the excitement from farmers, from others, is that we're now getting into a place where really really great emerging technology is coming into that learning and development space. Because, when's the last time that happened, right? Learning and development always kind of gets a bit of the shaft in terms of budgets, right? They're always
Right.
right. And so what e-learning, I mean, e-learning's fine, but interactives, the old interactives, I mean, now we're talking about virtual human technology and some really fun, engaging stuff. So I think aside from the efficacy, there's some really amazing engagement that's coming out of it.
So we do a lot of training at 470. I mean, it's a fairly reasonable spend for us. And we do it not as a public service, but because we want our adjusters to be highly proficient at what they do. In a program like that, could we buy like a group of glasses or goggles, excuse me, and send them out and let them run through it, and then they send them back so that they get reused, cleaned up and reused, of course. I mean, can an org like ours benefit from yours?
We have small organizations, medium, and obviously some of the larger ones. It's not just about, well, we need this to scale because we have so many people. At any level of business, investing in your people is pretty ubiquitously known as one of the smartest things you can do. Invest in your people, invest in their knowledge, and from there, that translates to better financial bottom line, and it translates to a better customer experience, right? And so it doesn't matter if there's 5 people or 500.
So I'm very interested in what separates you from your competition. I'm on your website, and it looks as though you have a very interesting learning platform, but it's the graphics that have really stood out to me. And I was looking at your past history. You have extensive history in film. Talk a little about that. Is there anything you've learned in your past life that you're using here, or what is your mission?
Yeah, you're a Hollywood guy.
I wouldn't go that far. Yeah, both Kyle and I come out of pretty extensive experience in entertainment and advertising, content for film, television, various types of visual effects. And I would say what we learned is not just how to make things look amazing, because you can do that, but that costs a lot of money. It's also not necessarily the most optimal way to deploy VR. It's really about where and when to balance the quality of not just the visuals, but the performance and the voice and what is the overall experience. Because when you're building content, right, when you're building visual content, and you're really generally thinking about how it begins and to how it ends, right? You're going through a process of how does a human, how does the reader, the viewer, or the learner, how do they engage? What context are they bringing? What do they know? And what do we want them to get out of this? So in learning, you obviously have learning objectives. There's learning goals. We start with those. How do we achieve those goals? And do we leverage the most high-end visual fidelity? No, not necessarily. But sometimes you want to make things glisten and shine a little bit more. But really what it's about is trying to really find the features
Yeah.
within the experience that really set it apart from other learning modalities. In other words, don't just repeat what you're doing in a PowerPoint in VR. How do we build an experience that is memorable and gets us to a creative way of thinking, as opposed to just something we remember? Because we want to get that brain thinking and walking away with a level of creative and critical thinking.
Is that something you're working on a lot? Is the human brain and the way that it learns and the best way to absorb the information? Is that something you're focused on?
Where to begin on that question? That's a great one. Yes, we're focused on skills transfer. At the end
Okay.
of the day, the larger picture, the larger vision is, what are people going to be doing in 10 years and 15 years and 30 years? What are the jobs of the future? Not just 2022 and 2025,
Right.
but what are the skills that are required going forward? So we've begun a skills mapping, and that's really what our back end will do. We're building toward an ecosystem more than just individual content. So right now we're building individual content, eventually, actually not too far off, we'll have tools so that our other organizations can build content themselves. Beyond that, the ecosystem, the whole of the platform, endeavors to really understand the user's innate skills and what skills they can learn and automatically tune to who that user is. So Lee, you go in and you index at a certain place in sort of the overall skills ontology. And Rob, you do so as well, but obviously somewhere else because we're all unique. The system would then train you toward what your needs are most according to your organization. It's pretty heady. So, yes, we're working on ensuring that why we train is as important as how we train.
So let's talk about actually using these things. Is there or are there field applications for this technology within your organization that you guys see for insurance? For example, if somebody's on site.
In insurance, we know, and I'll use the same one I used prior. There are certain times where you do have to go into the field, whether it's catastrophic loss, or you're going to go and do an assessment of a site that may need to be underwritten. The ability to use one of these devices to capture is available. I think the other thing to remember about a field tool is its ability to communicate. That's really important. So let's say I'm in the field at a catastrophic loss and I'm capturing all sorts of data and I see something that I'm just not sure. Well, I could call you out there for you to come see, or I could take a picture and send it to you, right? All the things that we do now.
Right.
Or I could essentially loop you into what I'm seeing. So now you're there with me, or I capture the environment and you can see. So the idea of phoning a friend, right? It becomes much more tangible, right? You're phoning a supervisor, you're phoning the expert, and that's important as we start to bring younger folks into roles and responsibilities where they don't have a decade of experience. It would be great to be able to have the veterans connect with those newer, younger, less experienced employees.
I want to ask a couple questions as we come to the end of this about your company
Yeah.
and whatnot. I know that you're approximately 5 years old. That's pretty old in the world you're in. You're
Yeah.
early, if you will. I see that you just recently did your Series B,
Yep.
which you did during the period of COVID, which must have been nerve-wracking.
It was just before, thankfully. Yeah. I mean, you need a little bit of luck in life and in business, and timing was that we started looking and raising at the end of last year, and so we were pretty lucky. Cornerstone on Demand led that round, and they're a massive and great learning management company and an aggregator of fantastic learning content. They saw where a lot of the future of learning is headed as we begin to deploy more emerging technologies across learning and development.
Mm-hmm. Just talk for a second about your life as a startup. I mean, you guys are in like we said, to turn out your product isn't just some coding. It's very
No.
complicated. And one of the things that we commonly talk about on our show is that when you get into insurance, as we've all gone through, most of us don't know what it is or how it works or where it starts or what a house is. And, I mean, everybody knows what a house is, but you don't know how it's put together. So there's so much to learn. You guys had to learn about insurance, let alone trying to put a product together to support it. What's that journey been like?
So what's the journey been like? I think that I think we're lucky that we did get into insurance, right? Like we joke and others joke about how deep we are in this space. And while it is an industry in which there is a lot of risk assessment, a lot of procurement, a lot of slow moving parts, but the industry really does need some emerging technology in its training space. Not because the training's poor, but because the world is changing around it.
One of the things that we struggle with, going back to our particular company, for somebody to be a good adjuster,
Yeah.
takes years. Is that fair to say, Lee?
Yeah, I would agree.
Just as an average, how long does it take for somebody to become a good adjuster, a field property adjuster?
Yeah, we would look for one to 2 years.
Right.
I mean, we have a customer whose requirement in our contract with them is that we can't use an adjuster with less than 3 years of experience. And they do that for obviously because they want somebody who's more experienced, more knowledgeable, less prone to make errors.
Yep.
And learning how to be a good adjuster takes a long time. You're not there in 2 months. You're not there in 6 or a year. So what you guys are trying to do, I mean, I'm right in saying you're about shortcutting, or not shortcutting isn't the right way to say it, but
Educating in a quicker manner. Imagine how many claims you could go through and how quick you could go through them if you had the VR set up. You could do claim after claim after claim, where sometimes you wait months and months for a storm to come through. You would be able to get that much more training that much quicker.
Yeah, it's batting practice. I mean, not only where you want to get a lot of batting practice, right? That's kind of what this allows. It allows a shorter trip to efficiency, a quicker road to becoming more not just efficient but comfortable. You know that we've often heard that at 6 to 9 months, depending on the organization, employees will get a little bit comfortable, and that's where they start to make their mistakes because they've gotten comfortable and almost too comfortable.
Right.
And that's where an additional dose of training is needed. Our goals here are really to transfer the skills and knowledge and comfortability of decision making at a quicker pace that truly does affect us cognitively in a different way. When we train this way, we're having a different cognitive experience.
Right.
And because of that, it's imprinting on us in our brains completely differently. And so we're, ideally transferring knowledge in a more efficient manner.
It's a different experiential level that you're providing, right? It's an experience, not just, the input of information as we've traditionally received it. Well, we have really enjoyed having you with us today and learning about this really exciting thing. And I have a couple things I need to say before we end. Number one is shout out to Stephen Gregory.
Thank you, Stephen Gregory, connecting us.
Who connected us together, because he's the innovative person who first fell in love with your product.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Katie Hara, she's a FNO veteran now. This is her second podcast she's actually been on with us. Hey, Katie. And third, you need to send a pair of these goggles to Mr. Lee Boyd, who, among many other important tasks he performs at our company, he's in charge of innovation.
No problem.
I think that we could use these in our org.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's a fair trade.
Done.
We get to burden you with being on this podcast, and in return, we get to check out your product.
Burden you with goggles.
That being said, thank you so much for being with us, and we'll look forward to having you again. Please stay safe.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Lee.
Yeah, Rob.
I'm so fascinated and intrigued by this.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it for our company, for 470. We do independent insurance adjusting in the field, and we struggle with the full capability of people, of insurance adjusters all the time, every day. We have a big training department and initiative that we spend a lot of money on. Could this help us? What do you think?
It absolutely could. It engages the person learning, and it, as you said, I mean, once you see it, it's more like you're seeing it and you're there. It's the experience. You won't forget it. I think he was saying it's 4 times more likely to remember than classroom learning. And if you think about the last time you sat in an auditorium, listened to a lecturer, I don't really remember what I heard. But the last time I went to a hands-on demo, I can tell you it was at Exactware, and I was learning about a brand new software that they had, and I was learning. But I think it's great. And, we originally, I think it was 2 Christmases ago, we got a VR headset, and it was for entertainment. We could ride a roller coaster using our phone and the VR headset, and it was awesome. But to use it for learning, especially with what's going on in the world right now, with school-age children who can't be there, college students who need to
Right.
learn about different cultures or different experiences. VR education is really the future, is I feel.
I would think that the big problem is content.
Yeah.
Is how broadly content is available. But be that as it may, within our space, there's content, and that's so encouraging. It's basically the closest thing to hands-on learning that we have.
Yes, I think it's really neat. I look forward to the day when he comes out and says we have customer service training and you can interact with a insured or a policy holder and be able to actually work on customer service, because that's something that we can't really train over and over in a real world scenario, but that would allow us to. I think that would be neat.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that this is a big pain point for us, a big problem. They're helping, I'll say, to solve a big problem that not only our organization, the insurance vertical, has, but any claim organization has,
Yeah.
all the way up to
Yeah.
State Farm, any from State Farm on down. This is a big problem.
Right. It's not just insurance, it's any service oriented company, right? Whenever you're
Mhm.
going out to learn about different parts of a home or a auto or whatever, yeah, it's a need. And I think that they're filling that void.
Yeah. How do you expedite the learning curve?
Well,
Big challenge.
big challenge.
And that's one of the exciting things about what we do at FNO InsureTech is we talk to people who are out there trying to solve big challenges
Mm-hmm.
or challenges large and small, mostly large. And
Mostly
that's
large.
cool. It's cool to be around people like that, right? Because
I
what
love
are we
it.
trying to solve? What's for lunch? That's what we're trying to solve.
That's true.
Anyways, we love that you were with us today. We thank Stephen Gregory, Stephen Fromkin for being with us today, Katie Hara for making it happen. We thank our production team, Al Moya and Alicia Moss. And I thank my co-host, the one and only Lee Boyd, who's such a pleasure to work with. I hope you all have somebody to work with like Lee Boyd. And we'll ask Lee, is there anything you want to say before we go?
Well, I'd also like to say I like you, Rob.
That wasn't what I was looking for, but I'll take it. I'll
Okay.
take it.
And also with that, I'll say goodbye, everybody.